The first time I locked the steel gate across my cattle road, 42 HOA homes lost their shortcut to the highway. By 7:15 that morning, SUVs were backed up outside my ranch, horns blaring, parents shouting, phones recording. At the front stood Martin Clay, the Willow Creek HOA president, slamming his fist against my pickup hood like I had trapped his whole neighborhood on purpose. "Open this gate, Caleb," he yelled, his face red with rage. "You can't block a legal neighborhood exit." He waved a folded lawsuit through the bars. Behind him, residents called me selfish, threatened to call the sheriff, and screamed that their kids were late for school. I just looked past them at the dirt road cutting through my pasture, the same road my father had used for cattle, feed trucks, and fire access decades before Willow Creek existed. The HOA had put up signs on it. Their contractor had dumped gravel on it. Their brochure had renamed it like they owned it. But they never did. "You should call the sheriff," I said calmly, "and call the county clerk too, because that lawsuit is going to make everyone read the deed you ignored." Martin laughed. 2 weeks later, he wasn't laughing. The HOA withdrew its lawsuit, the developer was under county investigation, and the residents who cursed me at that gate were demanding to know why their board had tried to steal a ranch road that never belonged to them. My name is Caleb Turner, and before Willow Creek Estates showed up, nobody cared about the old cattle road behind my fence. It was just a strip of packed dirt and pale gravel running between two pastures, shaded by mesquite trees and marked by rusted T-posts my father drove into the ground before I was even born. To anyone else, it probably looked like nothing. To me, it was part of my family's history. My father bought that ranch in the early 70s, back when the land south of town was mostly grazing fields, dry creek beds, and long fences that disappeared into the heat. He was not a rich man. He fixed tractors during the week, raised cattle on weekends, and spent every spare dollar keeping that place alive. When my mother got sick, he refused to sell even 1 acre, because he said land was the one thing a family should never give up unless they had no other choice. After he passed, I inherited 83 acres, 1 old farmhouse, 2 barns, a stock pond, and that private road. I did not move there because I wanted to fight people. I moved there because it was quiet. I liked hearing cattle gates creak in the morning. I liked seeing dust roll behind my truck at sunset. I liked knowing every fence post had been put there by someone in my family. The road mattered because it was not just a road. It was how I moved feed to the south pasture. It was how I checked the back fence after storms. It was how fire trucks could reach the pond during dry season. And it was the same path my father had used every week for more than 50 years. Then the land next door sold. At first, I did not think much of it. A developer bought the old Miller property and started building a neighborhood called Willow Creek Estates. I was not against it. People need homes, and that land was not mine. I figured they would build their own entrance, pave their own streets, and leave my ranch alone. For a while, that was exactly what happened. Then I started seeing cars on my cattle road. At first, it was 1 or 2. A white SUV in the morning, a pickup in the afternoon, a delivery van following a phone map that should never have sent it through my pasture. I put up a private road sign. Then another one. I emailed the HOA when they formed and explained that the road was part of my ranch, not a public cut-through. Nobody answered. A week later, the signs were gone. That was when I realized this was not just a mistake. Someone was telling those residents they had a right to use my land. I tried to handle it politely. I went to an HOA meeting in a folding chair clubhouse that still smelled like fresh paint, and I told the board the road was private property. Martin Clay barely looked up from his papers. He smiled like I was wasting everyone's time and said, "We'll review it." They never reviewed anything. Instead, the traffic grew. School runs, contractors, moving trucks, lawn crews. People who had never met me were driving across my ranch like it was part of their subdivision package. And maybe that is why this story matters. Because when a board, a developer, or even a whole neighborhood decides your property is more convenient for them than it is protected for you, silence starts to look like permission. If you have ever seen an HOA or a neighbor act like private property is optional, let me know what you think. Because I learned the hard way that a simple dirt road can become a battlefield when the wrong people see it as free access. By the time I understood how far they were willing to go, Willow Creek was no longer just using my cattle road. They were selling it. The day I realized Willow Creek was selling my road, I was standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee in one hand and a glossy real estate brochure in the other. A neighbor from town had dropped it off and said, "Caleb, you might want to look at page 4. There it was. A colored map of Willow Creek Estates showed two exits, one on the east side, where their real entrance actually was, and one on the west side, running straight through my ranch. My cattle road had been renamed Turner Road, marked with a clean white arrow, and labeled as Secondary Rural Access to Highway 19. I read that line 3 times. Then I drove out to the gate. By the time I got there, a contractor crew was already spreading fresh gravel over the first 50 yards of my road. They had orange cones set up, reflective markers stacked in the dirt, and a new metal sign leaning against their truck that said, Willow Creek Resident Exit. I told the foreman he was standing on private property. He barely looked at me. He just pointed toward the subdivision and said the HOA had approved the work. 10 minutes later, Martin Clay arrived in his black SUV with 2 board members behind him. He stepped out, smiling, like he had been waiting for this fight. "Caleb," he said, "this road is essential access for 42 homes. You need to stop interfering." I told him the road belonged to my ranch. He laughed. "Then take it up with the developer," he said. "But until a judge says otherwise, our residents are using it." That was the first time I saw how far they were willing to push. Not by accident, not by confusion, on purpose. The next week, they removed my private road signs again. Then someone painted white arrows on the gravel. Then delivery trucks started using my pasture route. Then a moving truck clipped the old wooden gate my father built and cracked one of the posts clean through. When I emailed the HOA about the damage, they sent me a notice accusing my cattle of creating a hazard on a community access road. That phrase stayed with me. Community access road. They had taken my private ranch road, renamed it, advertised it, improved it without permission, and now they were accusing me of being the problem on my own land. Then the lawsuit arrived. The HOA claimed I was blocking a lawful exit, lowering property values, endangering residents, and interfering with access rights they said had been clearly represented when the homes were purchased. Martin even added a personal note in the email. "You should have worked with us when you had the chance. 42 families will not be held hostage by one stubborn rancher." I sat at my desk and read that sentence slowly. They thought the lawsuit would scare me into opening the road, but all it really did was give me a reason to pull every deed, every survey, every county record, every permit, and every lie into the daylight. I did not answer the lawsuit with anger. I answered it with a cardboard box full of paper. That night, after the HOA accused me of blocking their lawful exit, I went into the small back office my father used to keep behind the kitchen. The room still smelled like dust, old leather, and machine oil. On the bottom shelf, under tax records and cattle receipts, I found the folders he had labeled by hand. Deed, survey, road access. I spread everything across the table and started reading. The first thing I found was the original property deed from the 70s. Then I found the old survey map showing the cattle road inside the boundary of our ranch. Not beside it, not next to it, inside it. The roadbed, the fence line, the gate, even the ditch along the west edge all sat within the Turner parcel. The next morning, I made copies of everything. Then I checked my cameras. The footage showed HOA contractors removing my private road signs. It showed the gravel truck backing through my gate. It showed the moving truck hitting my father's wooden post and driving away. It also showed Willow Creek residents using the road every morning like it was a subdivision street. I saved every clip with the date and time. Then I printed every email I had ever sent to the HOA, including the first polite warning months earlier. I printed the message Martin ignored. I printed the notice where they called my ranch road a community access road. I printed the lawsuit. After that, I hired a licensed surveyor. He came out 2 days later with GPS equipment, orange stakes, and a quiet confidence that made me feel better before he even said anything. He walked the fence line, checked the old markers, compared the county records, and measured the road from end to end. When he finished, he pointed at the gravel. "This is yours," he said, "all of it." Then he showed me something even more important. There was no recorded easement for Willow Creek, no public right-of-way, no county road designation, no access agreement, nothing that gave the HOA, the developer, or those residents the legal right to drive through my ranch. My attorney told me not to argue with Martin anymore. No shouting at the gate, no blocking cars with my truck, no touching their signs until we documented them, just evidence, records, photos, and procedure. So that is what I did. I went to the county clerk's office and requested the subdivision plat. I pulled permit records. I asked for every access document connected to Willow Creek Estates. The clerk slid the file across the counter, and page by page, the truth got clearer. Their official plat showed only one approved entrance. My cattle road was not on it. That was the moment I understood the lawsuit had backfired. They had forced me to investigate, and the deeper I looked, the worse it got for them. Because the biggest surprise was still buried in my father's deed. The surprise was not just that I owned the road. The surprise was that my family had protected it in writing before Willow Creek ever existed. My attorney found it buried in the original deed description, written in the kind of dry legal language most people skip over. But one phrase changed everything. Exclusive agricultural access, retained by the Turner family and successors. He read it twice. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "Caleb, this is not only private land. This deed specifically protects the road for ranch use." That meant the HOA had not just mistaken my road for an old public lane. They had taken a deed-protected ranch access road and tried to turn it into a neighborhood exit. Then the county records made it worse. The final subdivision plat for Willow Creek showed only one legal entrance on the east side. There was no second exit through my ranch, no approved emergency access across my land, no recorded easement, no public dedication, nothing. But the sales brochure told buyers something different. It showed my cattle road as secondary rural access to Highway 19. That meant homeowners had been sold a convenience the developer did not own, and the HOA had no right to enforce. My attorney sent a demand letter the next morning. The HOA had to stop using the road, remove every sign, repair my damaged gate, correct their records, and withdraw the lawsuit. Martin responded with one sentence. No judge will side with one selfish rancher over 42 families. So I stopped arguing. I rebuilt the gate on the surveyed line, installed a new chain, mounted a camera, and posted a sign that read, "Private property, no public access, recorded deed on file." The next morning, Willow Creek's shortcut was gone. Cars backed up, horns started. Martin called the sheriff, confident I would be forced to open the gate. But when the deputy arrived, he did not ask me for the key. He looked at Martin and said, "Show me the easement." Martin stood beside the locked gate with a printed brochure in his hand, acting like it was a court order. The sheriff's deputy looked at it for about 3 seconds. "This is marketing material," he said. "Do you have a recorded easement?" Martin's face changed. Not much at first. Just a tight blink, a stiff jaw, a quick glance back at the residents filming behind him. "Our developer approved this access," he said. The county road officer shook his head. "A developer cannot approve access across land he does not own." I handed over my deed, the survey, the county plat, and the camera stills showing HOA contractors removing my signs. The deputy read quietly. The road officer walked to the fence line, checked the survey stakes, and pointed down at the gravel. "This road is inside the Turner parcel," he said. "It is not county maintained, not dedicated for public use, and not listed as Willow Creek access." For the first time since I had met him, Martin had nothing loud to say. Then code enforcement and the fire marshal reviewed Willow Creek's file. That was when the real problem surfaced. The subdivision had been approved with one legal entrance, but early planning notes showed the developer had been advised to provide proper secondary emergency access inside their own property. Instead, residents had been sold the idea that my ranch road solved the problem. It did not. The county ordered the HOA to remove every sign from my land and stop directing residents through the gate. My attorney filed a counterclaim for trespass, property damage, unauthorized improvements, legal fees, and an injunction to prevent future use. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. The same residents who had honked at me and called me selfish were now standing at the microphone, demanding answers from Martin. Why had the board sued me without an easement? Why had their brochure shown a road they did not own? Why was the developer suddenly not returning calls? Martin tried to blame confusion. Then he blamed old maps. Then he blamed me for refusing to cooperate. But this time, nobody clapped for him. Because once the county read the deed, the fight stopped being neighbor drama. It became a legal record. The HOA withdrew its lawsuit 10 days later. Not because they suddenly respected my property, but because their own attorney finally read the same deed I had been pointing to for months. The settlement was quiet, but the consequences were not. Willow Creek had to remove the resident exit signs, scrape away the gravel they had dumped on my road, repair the gate post their moving truck cracked, and send every homeowner a written notice admitting that Turner Cattle Road was private property with no HOA access rights. They also had to pay part of my legal fees. The developer had it worse. County officials opened a review of the subdivision documents and ordered the company to correct every sales map, brochure, and online listing that showed my ranch road as a secondary exit. Buyers who had been promised that shortcut started asking hard questions. A few filed complaints. One family told me they had paid extra for a lot because the sales agent said the west exit made the neighborhood more convenient. Martin Clay lost his position at the next HOA meeting. It was not dramatic. No yelling, no big speech. Just tired residents raising their hands to remove the man who had dragged them into a lawsuit over a road he never had the right to touch. After that, the gate stayed locked. I fixed the fence, replaced the old wooden post with steel, and left my father's cattle road exactly what it had always been, a private ranch road. I did not hate the families in Willow Creek. Most of them had been misled, but being misled does not give anyone the right to take someone else's land and call it community access. That is the part people forget until it happens to them. I did not win because I yelled louder than the HOA. I won because I saved the emails, kept the camera footage, hired the surveyor, read the deed, and let the county records speak for me. So if an HOA, a neighbor, or a developer ever tells you your property is basically shared, do not just argue at the gate. Get the documents. Check the survey. Save every message. And if this story made you think differently about property lines and private roads, share your thoughts in the comments, pass it along to someone who needs the warning, and subscribe for more stories where the quiet person with the paperwork finally gets the last word. Because sometimes a locked gate is not revenge. Sometimes it is just the boundary everyone else refused to respect.